Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'akol niyeh b'dvarai. Okay, good Erev Shabbos, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us as we continue our journey through Sefer Likutei Moharan, B'siyata D'Shmaya. Today's shir is sponsored by our very dear, beloved friend Yoni Shine, also known as Zohar Levi, also known to some of us as Tzion. The nishmas is Sep grandmother Esther Bas Chava Irene Shine, a true Eshet Chayil whose pure soul returned back to Shemayim yesterday. Is that a yard site, or is that, did he lose his grandmother yesterday?
I think
it's a yard site, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the one that Michelle was speaking about on Shabbos. I think so. Okay. Also by Reb Bernard Bollag, nishmas his father of Imari Moshe Israel ben Chavar Ya'akov, also by Yitzchak Gedalia ben Ilanit for the schus of Menashe Gabriel ben Chava and Avram Shlomo ben Ilanit, and by Zev Klein, nishmas his parents of bryndel Simcha and Ya'akov ben Yeshעיהו, also for shidduchim for Yehudis, Adina bas Elisheva, Rochel, Dovid ben Fayga, Kayla, Yonatan, Shimon ben Hadassah, Ronit, Netanel ben Meechal, Mahnaz, Dovid ben Yal, Noach, Avram ben Sar Rochel, Zev ben Rivka Bryndel, and all of Klal Yisrael. Also dedicated as a schus for continued refuah shalema. He reached out to me yesterday and told me that he's almost ready to make a Suda Saida. Chazei Hashem. So an amazing story, but in the schus of our learning, I really believe it. For Chaim Yoshua ben Chaim Miriam, and we'll soon be able to take his name off of the list. Be'ezras Hashem. Okay, so we continue with Torah and Dalet, and hopefully the goal today is to finish so we can start on Hey next week, a new Torah. And we continue with the paragraph at the bottom, part of the paragraph at the bottom of the second column on page Samach Beis Amud Beis, where we go back to the story of Parai and his dreams, because remember this was a Chanukah Torah, so it said around Chanukah time, Miketz, or maybe, no, it was said Shabbos Chanukah, as we're going to see. And we're going to go back there and find even further Remazim to everything that we've been discussing. Yesterday we looked at a remez in Sukkim in Mishlei, Mi al Shmai v'Yirad, Mi Asaf Ruach b'Chafnav, Mi Tzar Mayim b'Simla, and Mi Hekim Kol Afsei Aretz. And we learned how all of those things were tied into what we have been discussing with regard to trying to remember Alma Da'aseh, finding the Remazim and everything, engaging consciously in the avodas of the morning, of Shena, of Tzitzis, of Tfilin, of learning, of Tfila, of Mekach u'Memkar. It's been a long journey. And then fixing up Malchus by finding our dignity, Nekudas HaMashiach, the Bechina of David HaMelech, who's able to battle against the Ra'ayin of Naval, Avshalom, and Shimi ben Gera, 3 different kinds of Ra'ayin. Then we moved into the concept of Be'er HaMedameh, which is the consciousness of Lashon Hara, by way of music, right? To clarify our sense of Dimyan, to be able to live with holy, rectified Dimyan on account of music. We learned about what that is literally and metaphorically, to find the good points. That's what we have been discussing. And so we take all of those ideas that we spoke about and we bring it back into the episode of Parai having his dream, which is Parshas Miketz, that falls right around Chanukah time. That year it appears to have been Shabbos Chanukah. V'zehu. So now we go back to that episode. Vayihi Miketz Shnasayim Yamim. Says the Rebbe, Shnasayim Yamim b'Bechinas Moitziye Diba. Shnasayim Yamim he sees as a reference to those who spoke Lashon Hara. What shaykhis? Hanemer Behem, because the chief speakers of Lashon Hara in the Torah, even though Miriam, of course, right, is the symbol, right, for the Mitzvah of the idea of speaking Lashon Hara, but on a more general level, when you think about those who spoke badly about something else, it's the Meraglim, right? The Meraglim, or might say Diba Sa'aretz, and that just goes to show that Lashon Hara can be said about a person, it can be said about a thing, it could be said about it's just a negative outlook on a particular eventuality. That was the Meraglim. What was their punishment? They went for 40 days. Now, Klal Yisrael, we're going to have to wander in the Midbar for 40 years. And the pasuk says, Yom Lashana. Yom Lashana. One day of their Lashon Hara turned into a whole year. So the Rebbe sees Shnasayim Yamim as a reference to Yom Lashana. Yom Lashana. It's a reference to Lashon Hara, to the consciousness of Dibas Haaretz, the consciousness of Ayin Hara, and I saw a really interesting thing from the Parparas L'Chachma, one of the earlier commentaries on the Likutei Moharan, where he says that Rabbi Nachman says in a different teaching, maybe it's Samach Aleph in the second Chelek, or maybe it's in the Lamed, maybe Lamed Dalet, can't remember right now, but there's a Torah that the Rebbe says, which teaches about the way in which, as a person rises in consciousness and grows in their awareness, what happens is time shrinks. And the mashal that he gives is when a person sleeps and falls into a lesser level of consciousness, even though they could have a 15-minute nap, he says it can feel like 70 years, right? Because in their dream state, time is expanded. And this is not unlike a particular film whose name we will not mention that speaks about dreams within dreams. Within dreams, of course, they learned Likutei Moharan and they got that idea, but basically that's exactly what happens. Our time expands and expands and expands. And as a person grows and graduates levels of consciousness, time goes much, much, much quicker. And that's how he says to Mashiach, right, to a tzaddik who's beyond all of this, all of time is just wrapped up in one nekuda. That's why it says, B'ni hayomi l'diticha. Right, Mashiach is a soul that spans the whole history, but he's considered to have been born today, because to him, all of history is wrapped up and experienced in one moment. And then as you rise even higher than that, you get to the unfathomable level of the Ein Sof, time is just nullified. There is no time. That's how the Rebbe explains Lamalam and Azman, to give us a little bit of a mashal to that in terms of the distinction between our sleeping state, dreaming, and our wakeful state, right? Our regular living state of consciousness. So now that we understand that saying Lashon Hara already says that we've slipped out of Seichel and we've fallen into Medameh, that means that we're falling into a dreamlike state. Says the Parparas L'Chachma, that's why the Meraglim's punishment was Yom L'Shana. Yom L'Shana. Right? One day for them turned into a year, meaning it's hinting to the way in which, on their lower level of consciousness, one day of sleeping, they dreamed that it was a whole year, and that's why that was the reflection. Interesting, right? Of their pegam, on account of Lashon Hara not simply being negative speech about somebody, it reflects a consciousness that's a lesser level of consciousness. Memela Yom L'Shana, right? Just like a person goes to sleep for a little bit, and it feels like a much longer time. Okay, interesting thing. So that's Shnasayim Yamim. What happens then? On account of the Meraglim, they lessened Klal Yisrael's Ava de Kedusha because they got scared off. And what's HaKadosh Baruch Hu trying to do to us? Shubachinas v'kamatz hakayin, which is the aspect of, like we said, kamatz, which is the bechina of the kmitza of the kayin. Kamatz is keser. Keser is the ultimate rachamim, right? And that's what the kayin is associated with chachma or chesed. The tzad yamin, he's associated with channeling the rachamim of keser, right? And the tzad small his job is to hide, right, that revelation of keser in a certain bechina. And keser, of course, is inclusive of both karav yom asher hu lo yom v'lo layla. So that's why right after referring to Lashon Hara, Shnasayim Yamim, which is Miketz, right? Yom L'Shana, right? I'm sorry, Shnasayim Yamim. Then right away we remember, okay, Miketz, Shnasayim Yamim. Miketz, Shebechinas Pegam HaKamatz. Vayihi Miketz is connected to the word Kamatz, same letters. Vayihi Miketz, Shnasayim Yamim. Do you know that Miketz is going to be blemished on account of the consciousness of Shnasayim Yamim? If a person is in Yom L'Shana, which means Lashon Hara, right, in a lower consciousness, like we just explained, it's going to be a pegam for kamatz, for kmitza, for chesed, for ava, for being able to perceive the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming through all things, because we're having a negative mindset. What happens next? Like we go back, pari choyle, Koach HaMedameh, like we said, pari dreams. V'hinei oymen ala ya'ar, and he was standing by the ya'ar. We established that ya'ar zeh Pishain, right? That river is called Pishain. Pishain halacha is going back to what we said, that the Koach HaMedameh will want to rest in the mind of a Pishain halacha, a person who's teaching psak. That they need a Koach HaMedameh to kedusha, but they can be overcome by a Koach HaMedameh to sitra achra. And then from the Ya'ar Hainish Yadam Ba Sheva Shnei Sava Sheva Shnei Rav. From that river is emerging 7 years of satiation. That was the 7 healthy cows, as well as 7 years of famine, which were the 7 scrawny cows. Hainu Toivera. Like we said, the psakim that are produced by a Koach HaMedameh that's not clarified, has toiv in it, also has ra in it. It's a mixture of toiv and ra. So from pishain halachos, on account of upare choylem, which is the Koach HaMedameh, which is on account of the conscience of lashon hara, which is nasayim yamim, which blemishes kamatz miketz. What happens then is that comes out toiv and ra mixed together. The ra overtakes the toiv. There's no das. Because the toiv is nivla, is completely subsumed within the ra. But the tikkun for all of this is Yosef HaTzaddik. Yosef is so named. He's called Yosef because Asaf Elikim es Charpasi. Now, said Rochel, Hashem has ingathered my shame. Shu mamtikas hara. Yosef's whole inyan is to fix up the ra. Shu bechinas hara'av, which is the 7 years of famine. Bechinas hashaloi tikhu ayr charpas rav bagoyim. You shall no longer experience the shame of famine amongst the nations of the world. So you see, charpa and rav, right, are linked. There's charpas rav. Yosef is Asaf Elikim es Charpasi. And over here, he's fixing the Sheva Shnei Hasava. Shneva Shnei Harav on account of Sheva Shnei Hasava. V'hu b'chinas Asaf Ruach v'chulu. Right, which is the aspect of the ingathering of Ruach that connects that part of the Torah. B'chinas Ish Asher Ruach Elikim Boi. He is a tzaddik who has Ruach within himself. As Pari says, have you found a person who has the Ruach Elikim Boi like Yosef HaTzaddik? So we just finished with the Yosef HaTzaddik segment. The Yosef Yashis Yodei Alenecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Yaakov Avinu that Yosef would pass his hand over Yaakov's eyes, which is exactly what happened as Yaakov Avinu was laid down in his deathbed, giving brachas, and finally Yosef put his hand over his eyes. Yaakov Avinu was nifter. What shaykhis? What does Yosef have to do with putting a hand over eyes? Says the Rebbe, now that we've built this whole cluster of ideas of what pari is, what pishon is, and what it means to take the ben zachar, right, zikarin, to throw him into the pishon alachis, paris choylem, there's toiv and ra, shnasayim yamim, consciousness of lashon hara, miketz, the pegam of kamatz. Right? Now that we've portrayed all of that in the remez of pari, and Yosef is the foil to pari, Yosef represents zikarin. Yosef represents the fixing up of the ra by way of the toiv. Yosef represents is Hasher Ruach Alikim because he's able to select the positive ruchas. Memela, Yosef Yashis Yadai Alinecha. What's the yad? The playing of the instrument. Like we said, all the different ramazim. Vaitihi Allah Yad Hashem. Like we said again, V'haya Kimnagin HaMnagin. Shal Yidei Hayad Nishmar Ha'ayin Koach HaMedameh. Yosef will take his yad and it will cover over the eyes, meaning the eyes of Ayin Hara. Ayin B'Sava Mashadar Shalpasik Hashem L'Kagadalta Ma'ayid. He says, look in the Zohar Kodesh if you want a little bit of a more integrated understanding of the Torah, which we won't do, but you can do that on your own time to look it up there. And over there you'll see how already many of the symbols that Rabbi Nachman fleshed out are already encoded very, very tersely and mysteriously, and sort of in a vague way in that paragraph of Zohar Kodesh. But I just want to point out one nekuda before going weiter, is that over here we're saying that Yosef HaTzaddik represents the opposite of everything we've been learning. We've been learning about negative things. We've been learning about Gesundheitsstag, about the Miraclim, right? We just mentioned this morning, we're learning about the Pisha and Halachos, Koach HaMedameh. A person is looking at things negatively, a person who is hearing the bad music and not the good music. And I think it's very instructive that Yosef HaTzaddik, in the context of what Paris sees, is used as the symbol for a person who stays plugged into Zikara. And if we're mizbainin on what the consciousness here is, it's that, yes, 7 years of famine are coming. But so are 7 years of satiation first. What does that really mean if we were putting that into other terminology of the Chazal? Like we say about Mitzrayim, we say about other elements. Hiktim refuah lemaka. HaKadosh Baruch Hu prepares the refuah even before the makkah. That's really what Yosef HaTzaddik is conveying to Parah. There's going to be a makkah. Hashem already prepared the refuah beforehand, right? This is one element of how to stay in a nakuda tova, right? Finding the good point, musical positive, non-lashon hara kind of energy. In other words, Yosef, and this I think is very crucial, Yosef HaTzaddik doesn't negate that there's Ra. There's going to be Ra, right? And it goes a little bit to what we were saying yesterday. There's going to be 7 years of famine, right? There's going to be 7 years of famine. But Yosef HaTzaddik is pumping Pare up by saying, we have what it takes. It's contextualized. It isn't random. It isn't happening because it just happens to be happening. HaKadosh Baruch Hu prepared us for this moment. That's exactly what the tzaddik's job is. That's what Yosef is appointed to do. Yosef HaTzaddik says, okay, Pare says, okay, and now, right? Now you have everything. Now you know. Navin v'chacham, we learned in a previous Torah, Chachma and Bina. Right? Yosef HaTzaddik represents that inyan of the conjugation of Chachma and Bina, where yes, there's Bina, Din and Misar, and that's the place where fragmentation begins, but Chachma preceded it. That's exactly what Yosef HaTzaddik goes ahead and says in his interpretation of the dream. Chachma and Bina. In other words, fullness, satiation, abundance, Chachma, and then there's going to be Bina. But it was preceded by Chachma, and these two things are in interaction one with the other. If you can, saying a deep thing, if you can carry over the abundance of Chachma into the experiences of Bina, everything is even. Everything, it's perfectly fine. You'll have enough. Because it turns out Chachma gave you double. But that's really what it means. That's what it has to mean. They stored up, they had enough for those 7 years, and they had enough for the 7 subsequent years. There was double that fell. So, Chevra, listen to how deep this is, right? Pare is a big mekubal. He uses his words. All the wicked people are like the greatest Kabbalists, Haman and Pare and Bilam. Bilam was like, well, Bilam was actually a Navi. So, but Haman is like, he knew all the secrets of Torah. Pare is a big mekubal. Pare is telling Yosef HaTzaddik, you know why I'm choosing you? Because Listen to the lashon. It's so powerful. Achrei hoidia das elikim eischa es kol zayis ein. I think I mentioned this in previous Torah. Ein navin v'chacham kamoicha. I mean, there you go. Chachma bina das. Right. After you have the das of being able to make a conjugation of the 7 years of fullness and the 7 years of famine, ein navin v'chacham kamoicha. What does that mean? Chachma has double. Chachma has enough for bina too. Hikdim refuah lemaka bina. That's reflected in what Yosef HaTzaddik tells Pare to do. Store up double in the years of abundance, then you'll have enough for the years of famine. This is the lashon of this is the ayin toiva, the lashon toiva that counteracts the negative. Just to put it in other words, right? The tzaddik, who's the symbol of Yosef HaTzaddik, who is supposed to guard our ayin toiva, that even when we lose it, even when we feel like it's hopeless, the tzaddik guards our message, like we said yesterday, right? We learned last night, some of the chevra, about the job of the tzaddik and his dual messaging that he gives to ether. I think we learned quite deeply about that last night, actually. Mm-hmm. Says the, not to make anybody feel bad, but just a little. But it was very, very beautiful. I think it was very deep last night. So we say like this, that tzaddik's job is to remind you when you're going through a difficult time that you already stored up enough energy, meaning you have what it takes. Even when we find you in the 7 years of famine, that tzaddik already perceives that you must have had 7 years of plenty, meaning you must have inside of you the tools necessary to be able to deal with, address, engage with, and emerge victorious over whatever you're challenged by. The tzaddik looks at Bina and says, oh my God, everything's falling apart. That's what happens in Bina. Everything falls apart. We say that colloquially, right? That's that everything falls apart. But the tzaddik says, yeah, but there's also a metzias of chachma there. Underneath the surface, there's chachma. Use that doubled over energy, that doubled over refuah, and bring it out into the world of the makkah. You have the healing inside of you, I think, is the message that Yosef HaTzaddik is telling Pare. We're going to have a makkah, but we had Sheva Shnei Hasava first. Ein navain v'chacham kamaycha. Okay, and that fits in very beautifully with everything that we're saying over here, and that's perhaps the symbol of Yosef HaTzaddik. Okay, let's continue. And this is the aspect of a very beautiful pasuk, really parak, but over here we're looking at one pasuk that some of us will be familiar with. Ezkra niginasi balayla. It's such a beautiful pasuk. Wow. I remembered your melody in the nighttime. Im levavi asicha, with my heart I conversed. Vaychapes ruchi, and I had a searching spirit. Says the Heilige Rebbe Chusia Gonaleinu. Balayla. Let's focus on that first. Balayla. This all takes place in the evening. Sha'azu pikdainis haruchais, because that's when, like we said, a person is giving over his ruach as a pikadain by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bebechinas biyadcha afkid ruchi. We're on page Samach Gimel. If you look on the top corner, Samach Gimel. Biyadcha afkid ruchi. I take my ruach and I put it into your yad. That happens in the nighttime, like we learned. Says the Heilige Rebbe, Azai hazman lekabetz ruach toivim mitoich ruach ra. The nighttime is a very important time to do this process of selecting the good from within the bad. Like I said, we were going to get to his spoididus. That is the primary time for his spoididus. We learned this also in Torah, Nun Beis, right? We're not that far away from Nun Beis, where we learned that the ikar of his spoididus is supposed to be in a place where people don't walk during the day, at a time when people are not as awake in the same way and doing business and thinking about Elam Hazeh in the same way, right? That's the nighttime. Same idea here. Sha'az ikar azman shel haspoididus lehispoidid beina levein koinai, to be alone in solitude in the quieted world, v'lefarish sichas lefnei Hashem yisbarach, and to express whatever we have to say before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lasuach im levavai, and this is, to my knowledge, a singular formulation in the whole of the corpus of Breslov that I've seen, which is that the time of Hispaididus is not simply to talk about how difficult things are and beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu for help and speak about your yearning to get close to Hashem. All of this is true, and Rabbi Nachman says a lot of that explicitly in the teaching on Hispaididus, which is Kutumrat and Yonatan Chav Hey. That's how he presents it here, there. But over here the Rebbe says, no, you know what Hispaididus is for? Lasuachim levavai, to speak from your heart. V'lechapes haruach toiva, and to seek the good. Dahainu, and here he uses the lashon of Reish Pei Beis. Hanakudais toivais sheyesh bei adayin. You know what you're doing when you come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The avoida, and this is so incredibly powerful. We said something very similar in a previous Torah. Again, I can't flip through and find it. As I'm flipping through and finding it, we had a very, very similar construct. Yeah. In Torah Lamed Ches. Torah Lamed Ches Ois Hey. We said it over there. Ukishemedaber bein levein koinoi divrei emes shebelibai behisayrus b'tshuva v'roya b'chisusav ugdulas habayre. Remember we said over there, you can see your lowliness, because Gdulas Habar, Gedula we translated as Chesed, right? L'chashem Gdula v'Agvura, right? In front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love, and we were married over there on that very, very much, right? Here he's saying something slightly different. It's the same, but it's different. When you come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yes, Roya B'chisusav, you can recognize, you know, how much we have to fix and how lowly we might be and how distant we are. And you know, if a person's really doing his spodidus every day, you really get to, part of his spodidus could be to go back and sort of review everything that happened since the last Hispodidus. You sort of live Hispodidus to Hispodidus. And that's Cheshbon HaNefesh Kipshutai, but it's different because it isn't stam you sitting and thinking. It's dialogic, right? It's relational. You're doing it with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're like, all right, let's walk through the previous day. Because again, it's all data. Remember I said, a person who's living in a consciousness of Hispodidus, everything else that happens in life is Chomer Tov Hispodidus. It's grist for the mill. The main thing is Hispodidus. You live in order to give you more data, so when you come into Hispodidus, you can analyze. You just run analyses. That's what it is. You're just running data analysis. Hispodidus is okay. Now the computer's run its thing. I think we have a computer program. programmer among us, right? So I think there's such a thing, right? The computer runs its diagnostic test or something like that. Then you take all the data. Let's comb it through. Let's see what the report said. Let's figure. That's what a spodidus is. The rest of life is just the running of the system. His spodidus is when we go through the whole Indian. So you look at that and you say, well, I was trying to work on, let's say, Tavis Achila. I look back in the day, and there was a Simcha in shul or whatever, and they brought out the Rochel, and I wasn't so happy with the way that I pounced on it. It's I didn't really need 10 of them. Like that kind of, again, without judging oneself, without not in like this shameful way, but just in a reflective way. Like what was that? Like why was that? What was I missing? What? And you can talk that out, right? You can really talk that out. Anything that a person's working on. But the beauty is it's not in this depressive, shameful. That's what happens when we're not in Hisbodedus, when we're experiencing it alone. So then we feel, how could I can't believe Hisbodedus is just, that's interesting. Again, this is part of the journey. This is part of the process. This is a lechatchila, a process of growth. I'm with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and together we're just looking judgmentally. We're just looking at this video called, in my life, Yaakov Shalom Klein, from yesterday morning to today's morning. We're looking through the whole thing. I'm walking it through, and I'm saying, look at that. That was that. I wish I didn't react that way. I wish I didn't have to make that comment. That kind of thing, right? On the one hand, that's what a spodidus could be. It's very powerful because then day by day, you're focusing on things and you're course correcting in a microcosmic way. Some people do this year to year. It's called Yom Kippur, right? And that's the first and last time that they actually think about the way that they live. And they have a day, they feel quite guilty about it, they feel very inspired, and that's it, right? Imagine doing that it's a Bechina of Yom Kippur. It's absolutely a Bechina of Yom Kippur. It's Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's Asar Tshuva, Yom Kippur wrapped up in one, and then a little bit of Sukkot at the end. But I mean, it's really, if you do it Hisbodedus properly, mamish, like, and you give yourself enough time, Rabbi Nachman says an hour, to really go through that process, without lachats. You have an hour now. You got to talk through your whole. It's mamish, a daily therapy session, with the capacity to go back and really micro corrections, right? To correct by degrees, and you see change, you see growth. Of course you do, right? Because you're mamish on top of it. You're mamish. Your growth is the most important thing in your life, and you're literally able to have your hands on the steering wheel, kipshuta. Says the Rebbe over here, part of Hisbodedus is to do the process of Reish Pei Beis, which is to seek within yourself nekudas tova sheyesh bayadayim, to find good points that you still have. And I don't want to get too much into this now. This is going to be Reish Pei Beis. I have a whole approach to it. But that word adayin keeps coming back up again and again and again. And I think it's a reference to our inner selves, our inner child, our purity that we had at youth. That, I think, is emblematic of our holiness. There's nothing holier than children. Pure, innocent, untainted, just pure life, right? Kids. Age is getting progressively less and less, at the threshold. So now it's like 4 days old, and then by the fifth, no, I'm kidding. So, okay, but tiny little children, a baby is the holiest thing in the world, right? It's mom, it's just pure heaven, pure spirituality. So, as we get older, we feel like we lose that. Says the Heilige Rebbe, there are nekudas tova sheyesh by adayin. You still have a connection with what you not only were once upon a time, but on some fundamental substrata of your identity, you still are. You still are. You don't really move away from that. You just, there are layers and layers and layers that get placed on that, but that's the core. That's the absolute core. There's Bina, but the Chachma is there. It's the same theme. Right? Our Sheva Shnei Ha-Rav, but beyond that is the 7 years of plenty. Says the Rebbe, that's what you do in Hisbodedus. To seek good energy. Yes, you're allowed to speak out in the presence of Hashem your good nekudas, your good points. I'm really proud of myself. This is really amazing. Like, I really am working on that. And to focus on that and to appreciate that. It's an incredible thing. The fact that a person does this b'chlal is already nekuda taiva shevatayvos. You know, like, how many people really get to take out significant time of the day, make that a priority, really talk to Hashem, panim b'panim. It's unfathomable. The way that the Rebbe puts it again, I'll quote this lashon again. It's from the second volume in Torah. We'll get there one day. Ezra Hashem should all be in Eretz Yisrael learning this in person. Right. By then we'll have no excuse, because then it will be like a few years down the line. So, you know, you can start planning for then, by the time we get there. But the Rebbe over there says, Hispoididas hi mala eliyoina ugedoila min hakol. It's a pretty powerful lashon, given that Yiddishkeit has 613 mitzvahs, with millions and millions of sub-dinim and different hanhagas and minhagim and inyanim. Rabbi Nachman says, ugedoila min hakol. There is nothing greater than Hispoididas. That's what the Rebbe says. It is greater than everything else. So it's an incredible thing if you take the Rebbe a little bit seriously, you know, and you start to trust him a little bit. He revealed this new thing, and he said, "I can do it. Really, got to do it. You know, gedolim and hakol." To find the nekudas taiva sheyesh b'yadayin, levarura mitoicha rachara, to select them from among all the negativity. To see things authentically for real, in Hispoididos, not there to fool yourself or fool Hashem or fool anybody else. There is nobody else there, but you're not, like, what's the point of fooling anybody by not actually addressing the tough stuff, for sure. And that's the Kutzker level, real, right? Going beyond the golden outside, finding the wood. But don't forget the real reality, which is the golden box beyond the wooden box, right? That's Rabbi Nachman. Don't forget to look even deeper. So it's a balance of both. I have things I need to fix. I'm not hiding that. I have to really work on that stuff, and that's fine. That's not, you know, that's called being human. But then there's a chelik of Hispoididos, and it's minei ubei. It can't really be structured and planned out. That for 5 minutes I'm going to do that. It flows. It's a conversation. Nobody prepared, you know, to go out for lunch with their best friend, you know, and have a coffee and, like, sort of mapped out, like, here's how the conversation is going to go. You know, unless it was like a business kind of meeting, but Hispoididos is not like that. You're just hanging out with Hashem, and there's no lachas because you'll be back here tomorrow. It's not like, you know, you have a meeting with the King of Kings every single day. So you understand, it's not so much lachas. It's almost like, you know, what's the lashon in Kiddush Levana? You say, Ilmali loizachi Yisrael ela hakavol pnei aviyim shabashamayim pam achas b'chodesh daya. Right? If this would be our only encounter with the divine, once a month would be enough. But then I'd feel a little bit more lachatz because my time is so limited. I have so much to pack in. There's no limit. Every single day you'll have time.
It's a cheshbon. It's by the way you're describing. It's a cheshbon nefesh. Right?
Part of it is cheshbon nefesh, but it doesn't only have to be, because cheshbon nefesh doesn't include tefillah. Imagine a person sits, does cheshbon nefesh, and then they say, "Okay, these are all the stuff I got to work on." That's it. Gets up and walks away. Whoa. What do you think? You're going to work on that stuff? How in heaven's name are you supposed to work on that stuff without Hashem?
Cheshbon nefesh is like, the way I grew up in Yeshiva, the way I understand it, it's like at the end of every day, there's a cheshbon of how you conducted yourself during the course of the day.
Awesome. But what are you going to do with that then? The whole point is kirvas elikim, not to develop yourself in a vacuum. So what Hispoididos does, he says, do cheshbon nefesh, but do it in a conversation with the divine, who's the only one that can actually help you overcome these things. That's the element of bittul, of surrender. That's Breslov. That's the nekuda, where I'm bringing into it this not bittul in a Chabad sense, where I don't exist and, you know, I'm meditating on Einad Mavadai. That's also beautiful and important. It's different. It means I do exist, but I'm showing up with this vulnerability to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like I said the other day in Shir, I said it last night. B'chol yoyim v'yoyim yitzar shel adam misgaber alav. Every day a person's Yetzer Hara is right back at it anew, with greater strength. V'ilmalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu oizrei lo yuchala. If Hashem was not helping us, it would be impossible. His Spodidus gives us a daily opportunity to go through the things we need to work on and to verbalize that, articulate that, invite Hashem into the struggle. It's a different kind of thing.
A pen pal.
Like a pen pal, like mamish, like a best friend, a partner. And there's the aspect of surrender there, where you say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, I'm giving this to you. I cannot be Shomer Einayim today. I can't. And this is what 12 Steps really incorporated it, as one of their huge klalim, is the idea of surrender. But Rabbi Nachman speaks about it already. Like we mentioned, the Sichos Rano's Beis and many other places, to give it to Hashem. It's very powerful. It's very humbling. The reason that we mess up is because we're so set on control, and that's what makes all of our problems. His Spodidus says, I'm beginning my day or ending my day. Depends. Like if they were waking up Chatzos, that was the beginning of their day. So they had a completely different schedule. They had a completely different schedule. They were going to sleep at 7 o'clock. The Oivdim, right? They were waking up at Chatzos, and that's when they started their day. So it's very different than, because we're about to learn about Chatzos. Hard to do, and you wake up at 5:30 in the morning for a shoot. So their whole life was different. Maybe one day that'll be our life. I know many people that are in Kol Chatzos, and that's what they do. Very difficult when you have young children in a family in a normal culture. So everything has to be balanced. But that is a way of serving Hashem. That's what the Breslauer Oivdim did. They went to sleep, like I said, at 7 p.m. They slept there a couple of hours until Chatzos, and that was it. And that was Avodas Hashem the rest of the day. A little bit Mekach Memkar, whatever it was, but they were tzaddikim. They were mamish tzaddikim. We're also going to be. We're going to be tzaddik. If you follow this path, will we absolutely become tzaddikim? We will absolutely become tzaddikim. The Rebbe said, follow my eitzas, I will make you a tzaddik kamoini mamish. The Ezra's Hashem. So it's a long life. So Hashem, there are many years, and we'll get to take that journey. But that's this hindrance fancy. But that's what the Rebbe says over here, right? This is the consciousness of a spoid. Just part of that is to do cheshbon nefesh. Part of that is to give it up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Part of that is to find your good points. Part of that is not to pray at all or to say anything bad or good, just to talk out your life. His Spodidus is a big mixture of a kaleidoscope of different things. But this is one of them. And again, I haven't seen this anywhere else. Find your good points in his Spodidus. Levaram mitoicha ruach rosh azabachinas nigun. That's the aspect of a nigun, like we said. That's what it means to make a melody. Azamra v'letaiva oidi, like we said. Shagedeza nishmar zikaron keniskala el. Through that, we're going to be able to guard our zikaron and be able to help us stay plugged into the realm of unity, to the realm of oneness, to the alma da asay, to olam haba, reflecting chachma that came before it. Ta'aynu shagedeza zoicha liskar tachlisay ha'achron olam haba. Then we're going to be able to remember. We're going to learn more about this. Bezras Hashem for Samach Dalet. And Samach to really Samach more, to stay connected to the Tachlis of Olam Haba, to a realm of unity, to a realm of goodness and oneness, like we learned about in Torah Nun Aleph, and to constantly think about the end, to constantly think about the truth. That's why we're here. Just don't forget. The end is the beginning of Gewalt, because Chachma came before Bina. So really, it is an Olam Haba. Like it's the world. And it's what we learned about Shabbos. Like the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, Shabbos is not the end of the week. Right? Shabbos doesn't come after the 6 days of the week. Shabbos came before the 6 days of the week. And then we're just returning to the pre-creation energy. Mind-blowing. V'zeu, says the Eiliger Rebbe, Eskera Nigina Sibalayla. This is the pasuk that we're learning here. Im Lavavi Asicha. He says, the Rebbe, if you'll look carefully at this pasuk, Timsa, you'll find in every single word of this pasuk, again, these are brand new structures that nobody would have ever been able to discover unless you knew the Rebbe's in Hosea and the Rebbe's in Mishlei and the Rebbe's in... And then he says the Rebbe's making this up. How? Like literally, how? It's there are no words to capture what this person did. I can't even try to put it into words. Look at this. Ezkara. That's the zikaron. Okay, so I want to be in a consciousness of Ezkara. How do I do that? That's by finding the nigun. That's by finding the good points. That's by finding the remazim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending us in our machshava dibur ma'asav every day. Shubechinas be'er ha'toiv min aran, to select the good from the bad. Because it all happens through, like we said, playing nigudim with our yad, which is the bechina of ruach, which is the bechina of Yosef HaTzaddik, who's going to be yashis yadai al einecha, which covers over the bechina of ayin hara. That is the foil to parai and his chaloim and his yaar and his bishain and v'chulei v'chayina. Shu bechina simcha. When does that happen? V'zeu balayla. It's daika in the nighttime. Nighttime could mean kipshutai. That's what we've been discussing. Of course, it also means going through difficult times in life. Because that's when the ruach happens. We learned about leiv. Remember, mitzar mayim besimla. In that pasuk from Mishle was the bechina of leiv. Shivchi kamayim libech. Ka'yidei nigun v'simcha al yidei ze nishmar alev min Koach HaMedameh v'az yachal lishbech libay kamayim l'fnei Hashem, to pour out his heart like water before Hashem. Shezeo b'chinas, like we said, mitzar mayim b'simla haniskel el b'chinas shivchi kamayim libech noichach pnei Hashem. That's the time to pour out your heart in prayer before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ezgera niginasi ba'alayla im lavavi asicha v'zeo im lavavi asicha v'hechapes ruchi. Then I'll start talking about the true truth, not to get caught up in the negativity of life, not to get so stuck in what appears to be this way or that way, to remember why I'm really here in the first place, to remember that all this is an ashilya. It's a optical illusion, and that it's not really real, and this is, we're here just for a little journey. This is not really what all there is. We're going to leave this world, we're going to go back to where we came from, and that will be it. That will be it. To remember that every day. I have to find the good, because my whole avoid here is to stay positive. My whole avoid is to find the good, is not to get stuck in the ral, waste my life. What's the point? I'm so fretting and anxious and worried about this worldliness. What's the point? It's kehevel dama, right? It's gone in a minute. Kechaloim ya'uf, like we say on Yom Kippur, right? Like a passing dream. Kitzel oiver. And the Gemara says, not like the tzel of a building, but like the tzel of a bird flying over. It's like kitzel oiver. It's gone. It's gone. It is gone. And that's it. And we're here now consciously. So we have to find the positivity. What's the point of not doing so? It means that we're not remembering Amud. So that's what we're supposed to do. So that we can do tshuva and return to Hashem. Because that's what tshuva means. Tshuva means to return inward, to leave the world of bina and to enter into the world of chachma. To leave the world of famine and to enter into the world of abundance. To leave the world, right, again, of the irbuvi of the ruach ra, and I see some good, but I also see some bad, and to train ourselves to focus like a laser focus. Like we said, it's a big avoida to select the good points from among the negative experiences. This is the whole inyan of getting up chatzos. Not really recommended, if we're doing this year, because it's very hard to do, and you have to. Every person has to choose their avodas. You can't do everything. The kinar was taloi above the mita of David, like the Gemara tells us in Brachas. It would play on its own. How did it play on its own? Because the ruach's finest, right? That ruach came in through the window and played upon the strings of the harp. When it comes to chatzos, that's the time to awaken the holy nigun animshach mikina shal David shebechinas beru haruach taiva. And that's why it's the clarification of the ruach taiva. Tzfainis is gevura. North is gevura. Darim, right, is chesed. It reflects southernly, right? That's the flow of shafa, like mayim, that goes from above to below. And gevura is like fire, right? Pushes what's coming up, but what's coming down pushes it back up like fire, right? So the ruach tzefainis that plays a melody on David HaMelech's harp symbolizes the ruach toiva that emerges from within the gevura. That's the melody. The ruach Tzfainis, that even that realm of Gevura, even the Laila, Chatzos Laila, it splits the night in half. It says, okay, that was the nighttime, now we're beginning. Now morning is starting. Reb Nassim is marich on this ma'ay, right, in Likutei Alachis. Right, that's, I'm sure you've encountered, right? That splits the nighttime, and then from there starts the energy of dawn. And that's exactly what was happening. But it happened by way of a melody. Why? The Rebbe explains, because that's what a melody is. Pele Plai. That's what a melody is. And it happens from the Ruach Tzfainis. Because Ikar HaBeirur al Yedei Bechinas Nigan Bekli Haniskele El Shebechinas Kinor Shal David Shemenagan Oz, which happened on account of the instrument and the instrumentation of David HaMelech. That's who he was. Vahavin Heitev Dvarim Elu Lemaisa. And a person should really not just delight in the Olam Haba and the Gan Eden, of being able to be metayel with our consciousness in this incredible orchard, in this garden of these incredible ideas, but the Iker in Breslev is Lemaisa. Is to do this Lemaisa. So again, I said Chatzos is difficult, because when are you going to sleep? Right? So, and we're still humans at this point. So you still have to sleep a little bit. Not just a little bit, but to sleep properly. Something I'm trying to work on, actually, is to sleep properly. So I find it's going to hurt me later in the day if I don't sleep enough. I have to be healthy, so I can't try to jack the system. It's, Hashem created the human, and we need 7 hours of sleep. That's it. It's it. I used to think it's like a kunst, like, I only sleep. What game are you playing? For who? It's going to ruin you later on. Yehuda was right all along. Yehuda's been telling me this for months. I said, I can't. Yeah, I could, and I am. Baruch Hashem. And it's better. So, highly encouraged. But sleeping is important. It's difficult if you're getting up at 5:30, to be up chatzos. There is an inyan of going to sleep, waking up, and then, doing chatzos and going back to sleep. That is an inyan. It's possible. But, okay. But the Rebbe says there's so much here that we can take l'maisa. To live in a consciousness of ayin tova. Not to live in and to really work on that. But espoidedus, that's the ikar inyan. By Reb Nassim, he said one of 3 things that a person has to do, he says, is giving money to support the tefus of the Sfarim. It's a klal, Uman Rosh Hashanah, it's a klal in Breslev, and is supposed to do this every day. He said, Ba Reb Nassim, vehemidan al shalish. He took the whole corpus of Rabbi Nachman. He says, these 3 things are mamish core. Helping that the Sfarim should be able to spread, because we need more people accessing this Torah. But on the level of Avodah, and there were so many things that we already learned, like so many. Hispoidedus. Every day. Chayk v'layavar. Make time for Hispoidedus. Havin elu advarim elu l'maisa. Havin heitev dvarim elu l'maisa. Let's finish up quickly. Zois Torah number b'Shabbos Chanukah. This Torah was said over on Shabbos Chanukah. Ve'achash amar Torah hazois amar. After Rabbi Nachman said over this Torah, he said, Ani amarti ata eichman likener Chanukah. Now I taught you how to light Chanukah nears, which is bechinas la'amshecha meshach ravus kudsha la'ad lekabutzina, which is how to draw down holy oil and to kindle the flame. Shemen, we know, is mishras kodesh u'adas kiyadua. It refers to chachma, which mixed with bina produces das. Ner, we said already yesterday, is either nefesh and ruach, or neshama and ruach, depending on where a person is. How do you do that? By drawing down chachma me'al b'da'aseh. Hainu b'chinas hagdalas hadas hanal shebechinas ikarin haniskula el v'lei ber yoser. He didn't really explain, but again, that's the bechina of what Reb Nachman said to Reb Nassim when he started to, ask questions. He said, "Das duzag. These are for you. I gave you little hints. Now you make the chidushim. Now you sit. The Ezra Hashem, we're going to come up to Chanukah in a couple of months. Review Torah and Dalet, and you'll find ramazim of how the whole inyan of Chanukah is all kashur to this. But that's not our avodah right now. But that's what Rabbi Nachman was telling them. Shaykh La'el, mi asaf ruach b'chafnav, going back to that remez in the Psukim in Mishlei, mitzar mayim b'simla kanal, v'zeu yashiv ruchai yizlu mayim. Yashiv ruchai settles the spirit, yizlu mayim, and water flows forth. Al yedei yashiv ruchai, shemalakad ma'asav ruach b'yadai, al yedei ze yizlu mayim. When a person is able to gather together the ruach, so then yizlu mayim b'chinas me mitzar mayim, shub'chinas halei b'chinas shivchi kamayim libech. Again, another remez in a pasuk in Tehillim of ruach and mayim coming together. Now that we know what they are, when you collect the ruchas toivais, then the mayim, which is connected to the leiv, shivchi kamayim libech, is able to pour forth right before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a spirit of dignity, Malchus, David HaMelech, Malchus de Gedusha, hope, optimism, positivity, and empowerment. Okay, let's finish off. Klali ininhu. The klal of this inin is Masha Amar Abisin is Chalaracha Ein Adam Dan Gzeir Shava Me'atzmai. Chazal say the Gemara Psachim and Nida other places a person should not make a Gzeir Shava on their own because it looks very tantalizing. Like it's like monkey see, monkey do. You see Chazal making Gzeir Shavas. Why can't I go and make a Gzeir Shava? I found a word here. I found a word there. Make a Gzeir Shava. Say Chazal, no. You need to be mekabel from a Rebbe. To make a Gzeir Shava is literally Koach HaMedameh, and that's what you're doing. You're being Medameh Milsa Lemilsa. Say, oh, that applies there, so I'm going to apply it here through Gzeir Shava. All right? To make a Gzeir Shava one thing to the other. No, I can't do that. Shemedameh Milsa Lemilsa, Kanal Ayin Sham. Al Kain also Ladon Gzeir Shava and Ledamis Milsa Lemilsa Me'atzmai, Elam King Kibla Me'Rabbi. That's why we need to be Mekabel from our Rebbe, the Rabbi Me'Rabbi, and his Rebbe from his Rebbe, Admai Shrabbeinu. Allah V'Shalom in Pi HaGvura, right? Who was Mekabel from Pi HaGvura, Kedeli Natsa Koach HaMedameh, so that a person can be saved from his Koach HaMedameh, V'Havin. So, you need to be Mekabel from your Rebbe. Your Rebbe was Mekabel from his Rebbe, until Moshe Rabbeinu, Alav Shalom, and then Reb Nachman told Reb Nassan in Chayei Moharan, he said, but you, I have clarified all of your Koach HaMedameh. Not that you can make a Gzeir Shava halachically, but once a person is saturated, activated, their mind becomes a Mayach Gadol, on account of being trained in this way of thinking. Rabbi Nachman says, no, you're going to know how to make a not a Gzeir Shava, but to be Medameh Milsa Lemilsa. Rabbi Nachman's whole Torah is built on the Gzeir Shavas. If we share in the mind of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, then our Rebbe is the Baal Shem HaKadosh, right? Because that's the tzaddik that came before Rabbi Nachman, right? In this line, he was Mekabel from his Rebbe, which is the Ari HaKadosh. That's Rabbi Mirabbi. He was Meechal from his Rebbe, which is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And he says, Ad Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? It goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Kibla me Rabbi, Rabbi me Rabbi, Ad Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Shalom, which is channeling me Pia Gevura. It's a chachma-minded, expansive, interactive mind that's fully activated. Like if you ever saw a brain scan of someone on one of the psychedelic drugs or deep meditation, the whole brain is activated. All the links, all the connections, the whole brain is... That's what Rabbi Nachman does. He wants to literally give you over a moyach gadol, which we interpreted in the very beginning of this series, a mind that's able to really grasp the totality among all the different parts. I think Torah and Dalet is like a chief specimen of that. I mean, what a journey. What a journey. I think this may be the longest that we've ever done. It's been 10 shiurim. It's quite, took us a long time. But Hadron Alach, Torah and Dalet, Hadra Chalan, and again, the Iker is L'Uvda L'Maisa. These are Torahs to be reviewed, especially on Shabbos. You go back and read it over and get clarity in it, fluency in it. Should be zeichet to put it into practice. Le'alimru ha'Iker Ela ha'Maisa. Yasher Koach, have a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful Shabbos.
Ani haben ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני